Unity consciousness, or unity for short, is a nice way to describe the state of consciousness that you're in when you're awake, when you're self-realized. So we could call separation consciousness egoic consciousness, or ego for short. And then when we're awake, we could call it unity consciousness, or unity for short. So when we're in egoic consciousness, we're automatically believing we are separate. We're believing we're a person and that we are a subject located here somewhere. And everything outside of us is objects that are separate to us. And that's how we're perceiving the world. And this is where we begin. And we break through that illusion. We get to see that that's an illusion, that there is no such thing as separation, and that there is no person here or no people here, there's no subject here and no objects out there, and all of the rest of the illusion. We get to see through that through the awakening process, step by step, until it becomes a permanent way of being. And this permanent way of being we could call being in unity consciousness, or perceiving oneness. So this happens when, for me anyway, how I define it, when the mind has awakened permanently, it has shifted and realized it is emptiness. It realizes I am nothingness. And that's a permanent, not just a taste of emptiness, but a permanent way that the mind is operating. And then after that, the heart awakens and permanently stays open. And so these two centers open. The mind is open permanently, and the heart is open permanently. And with that heart awakening that happens, you could say you shift into unity consciousness at that point, as just a way to describe it. So from that point onward, you are perceiving through the mind emptiness everywhere you look, and the heart is perceiving that that emptiness is you, and that it is everything, absolutely everything, and everything is welcome, and nothing is divided, and this is where all the suffering ends, because there's nothing to push against anymore. Everything is allowed to be as it is. And so unity is a really beautiful way to live. And I often use the word oneness to describe how it's perceived, as it's all perceived as one, as yourself, and as the one consciousness. You're perceiving that every moment. That's your lived reality. So we can have unity experiences, and we will have many when we're going through an awakening. And these are the ones that are usually the most popular. These are the ones where we see, ourself on everyone's face, or we see God on everyone, or Jesus on everyone. There's some type of oneness quality to it, and it's usually very heart activating. We might tap into unconditional love. It's very feel good type awakening experiences. So they happen through the awakening process to give you glimpses of what unity is like. But to live from unity is quite different to the glimpses that you get along the way. And there are elements to it that are the same, but living moment to moment, day by day from it, you adapt to it, and you could say the intensity, or the obvious shine of unity at the beginning, perhaps even for the first year, it's very strong. It feels very, very good, and then you start adapting to that, and like anything, so it normalizes. And so it's not to say it doesn't feel good anymore. It's just that that's how you are all the time, and so you're used to it. So it's not quite the same as having a glimpse of unity, because when we're doing that, we're coming from such a constricted place. We're coming from ego, and then we're having a glimpse of something that's so opposite in a way. And so the contrast really makes it seem so huge and feels so wonderful. And thank goodness for that. Those openings are amazing. But living from it day to day is experienced quite differently. So my unity journey, as best I can remember, so far has been going for about 4 years. And I would say the first year, or perhaps 6 months, was really about just settling into that shift that had happened when the heart had opened permanently after the mind had awakened. And the settling in, it took a while to get used to certain facets of it. And most of it was like pretty good, honestly. It felt really good. It was probably the best I'd ever felt in my life. There was an innate power to it and confidence. There was joy and peace as a resting way of operating through the day without any effort, a resting happiness. And it was really lovely and very soothing for the body and the nervous system that had been through such an intense awakening. And so initially it was unity was very obvious. It was very strong in a way. And there was lots of inner talk about that's me too. So seeing an old man and like, that's me as an old man, and seeing a baby, that's me too. That's me as a baby. How lovely. It's so lovely. It's so beautiful. How wonderful. That's how it was playing out internally, and just seeing that's me too. That's me too. And seeing a little weed coming out from the rocks and meeting it and going, oh, there I am as that precious little weed. She's got a real sweetness, a real intimacy to it. It feels very lovely energetically, almost like the waves of the ocean. You can feel that it's you, and it's waving through your energy body, and it can feel the oneness of that. And so it feels very divine and beautiful on a lot of levels, certainly. And then you start a journey of adapting to unity, and then going through the things that you need to learn in the unity part of awakening, because it's not the end of the journey. I'd say it's about the halfway point of awakening, just as a rough guide, when you shift into unity. And then you've got this period of you're awake, you're self-realized, but you're really a baby Buddha at that stage, and you've got to learn how to be in the world, operating from this place that can be almost vulnerable in a way, having such an open heart and being so loving. You've got to learn how to operate in the world from that place. And so there's quite a lot to learn and adapt to in unity. So here's some of the things that I can remember that have happened, but there was quite a lot. So initially it was just feeling into it and seeing that's me too, that's me too, that's me too. There was a lot of that going on. And then that seemed to finish when it was like I'd seen that everything was me and that there was nothing missing externally. And then there was still a process internally of a remaining amount of content that was anything that I had unknowingly pushed down, that was still unconscious, that I had not accepted for whatever reasons. We'd call this shadow work, or there were parts from difficulties from the past and things like that. Anything from the past, typically, that wanted to arise and also be seen, that this is also welcome here. And so that process had been going through awakening, but now it continued through unity, and it was the same content. There was nothing new arising at this stage, but perhaps some deeper layers to it, and still seeing, oh, I identified there when that wound happened, and bringing awareness to that child part and loving that part of me and that thing that happened. And so it was all very loving, experiencing, encompassing the whole, every single part externally, seeing that was me, and then every single part internally, and seeing that is also me and that is also welcome. So through awakening, we initially start with a process of emptying out, and we're doing things like neti and seeing, I'm not this, I'm not that thought, I'm not that emotion. And that really helps us to get in the position of pure awareness. It's a very helpful first step for awakening. But then it evolves into more unitive practices where we start to be able to embody the truth. We need to then see that thought that I had, that is also me, which sounds counterintuitive, but it is the way forward with awakening. So we go through a process of saying, it's not me. And then we go through a process of saying, it's all welcome. It is actually an expression of me. That's actually more true. And so there's layers of truth. And they're paradoxical, and they conflict with each other often. And so this is a part of unity where you just, anything that's remaining that was inside of you that felt divided is then brought back and made whole, and you feel complete. You feel like you're home. You feel like this is what I've been searching for. And with that, there's peace and joy, and operating from that in the world is really lovely. There's a familiarity that you have with others because you see them as yourself, and so people can feel that. They can feel that you love them. You love them because they are you, and you find them sweet, and you find the story of yourself, the character story. You find that very sweet. The words I would choose would be sweet and loving and beautiful. These are the words that you're saying when you're in unity, and because this is how you feel. And so people like to be around that's one thing that's nice, but it's also just a nice way to be in the world, to be at peace inside, to have that harmony. And so moving forward from that, through unity, I would say the next thing that was happening was that any type of paradoxes that had been just unmet or not quite dealt with were seen and resolved, basically, and so and lived from. So they weren't a problem that needed to be solved, but what happens, there's a complete acceptance of them, and there's no resistance to their paradoxical nature. So I'll give you an example so it makes sense. So you can see experientially that you're in form, that there's a body mind here, but that you're also, everything is emptiness. You're perceiving that, and everything that you see is that divine emptiness, and you can see that it is God, and that it is you, but that you are all form here and everywhere else, but all of that form is made of emptiness. And these things don't make sense. They don't make sense to the mind. They're not logical, but your lived reality is that. And so it makes total sense experientially. So all the paradoxes and things that were confusing you through the awakening journey are just resolved and accepted in early stages of unity. And you live from that. You know it's a paradox. You know it's not going to make sense to anyone, but it's your lived reality, and you have no resistance to that. So that would be another part of, I'd say, early stage of unity. And then you're sorting out the remainder of your karma, and so that's going to be quite specific to you, but you're going to attract tests and from life to help you to iron out that remaining karma. So whether that's attracting a difficult person into your life, a difficult conversation, or difficult relationship, or whatever it may be, but there will be some challenges, just like you experienced through awakening when you're in egoic consciousness. And I would say these challenges are very specific for what you need to learn, to grow for your spiritual growth, or to help you to let go of any remaining identity. So they're very specific, and I would say they get harder because you're more capable. So it's like that, it has to increase the difficulty because you're becoming more and more capable. And with that, you grow strength. And so I'd say strength is one word I would use to describe the unity phase. There is a confidence and strength that is innate within awareness. And so you operate from that naturally. And it doesn't matter what path you had before and whether you had those skills before. It's not a skill now. It's just that awareness is that way. And so you further develop that strength through ironing out any of those karmic imprints that are remaining. And so this could be learning how to do public speaking, learning how to stand up to someone, learning how to stand up to a bully. It could be really anything, but life will show you there's a bit of a weak point here. There's something for you to work on, or you haven't learned how to have relative love in a romantic relationship. Here's something to work on. And so that will be presented to you in unity to help you to continue evolving. And so often, some of these things can be lovely. It's going to depend. It's going to be different from person to person, but some of these things are going to be really challenging events that take place to help you to really let go to such deep unconscious content. But you work your way through them, and with that, you develop more strength. And with that, the empty center within you that opened up when you initially had this shift into unity, and is continuing to empty out of content within you, that strengthens and strengthens continually, and you are unmoving internally. So initially in unity, you still might be swayed. You might be swayed by someone else's opinion. You might still have your old tendencies operating a bit, but as you go through the layers of unity, you'll start to see that you are fully autonomous. You can't be swayed by anything that's happening external to you. You know that there's no people there, and that's not relevant to you, no matter what it is that's happening. You'll still operate in the world, but you know you don't have to pay attention to what's being said, even if it's someone screaming in your face. It's not relevant to you. And this is what autonomy is. You're not swayed by what's going on around you in your environment anymore. And so you strengthen that autonomy in unity, and you strengthen the internal strength within you, which makes you more confident and powerful in a way. And then you start to learn lessons that are quite specific to the unity phase, and you may have started learning them earlier on, but they become more involved. And these are things like boundaries, how to have strong boundaries. So how to be awake in the world and live from having an open heart permanently, but also have boundaries and understand self-care, even though you know there's no person here. Again, with the paradoxes, they come up constantly in unity, and you just live from them with no issues. And so you will learn issues to do with self-care and your health if you haven't learnt them already, and how to prioritize yourself while also being open-hearted, loving everyone unconditionally, and also naturally being of service in the world, which is also a part of unity, selfless service that we may have started earlier on and started practicing when we were working through awakening. And now this is a part of unity, is doing what's best for others or for the whole, but doing that with boundaries and with prioritizing self-care. And so it's like, how do you know how to do that? Well, you have to learn through life showing you and getting out in the world. So unity is really a phase of getting back out there. So you've had this internal hermit phase to wake up, and now this is an outward phase where we go out in the marketplace, and we are sharing this love that we have. And that's going to be expressed in all different ways. It could be teaching or art or music or however it wants to be expressed, but it's in a selfless way, not just in what it is that we're producing in the world or how we're serving, but also in just day-to-day, moment-to-moment, how we are with our family, how we are with others at the shop or whatever it is that we're doing, There is a selflessness to it, but we also don't get our boundaries crossed. And so we learn that bit by bit, piece by piece, and that takes years really to fine tune that skill so that you know how to operate in the world from this loving place that's also very strong, has strong boundaries, knows when to say no, knows when to push back even. So unity is very loving, but it's also not passive. It can be action orientated, it can be strong, it can say no, it can be loud if it needs to. There's definitely a strength and wisdom that if it's not there already when you arrive in unity, it will be developed through the unity process. And so you're getting towards later stages of unity, I would say the keywords now that you're fully unified. So there's nothing left to look at as far as content. And because there's nothing divided, you've seen and faced every single trauma, every part of you that was unconscious, every piece of your shadow, everything outside of you you've seen to be you. And so everything is completely unified now. You are strong and confident naturally. It doesn't require effort, and you respond and react spontaneously to what arises in an awake way, in a very healthy, mature way. And this happens because you've spent so many years developing that strength, and you've got no content left that's skewing how you're perceiving things. So you don't have projection anymore. You're not seeing a warped view of the world. You're seeing clearly. You're seeing everything is you, and that it is all made of emptiness, and that there's no people there, and that's and that it is all love as well. One of the trajectories during awakening is learning about love, and that is a very long journey that continues into the unity phase. And so, although when we shift into unity, we can see that everything is love, that we are love, and we can feel that, and that's very beautiful and very healing. There are still deeper elements that are that unfold during unity, and this is usually to do with any wounds or any beliefs that we had about love that still aren't resolved yet to get this far. And a lot of it was resolved to be able to get this far, but there'll still be some remaining elements to do with love, where perhaps you thought that you weren't lovable, or where you were rejected or abandoned, or things like that from the past that may still want to be resolved so that you can continue opening to unconditional love. And what unconditional love looks like, it's a shift that actually happens typically in the unity phase, where you are for me, it felt like a flame was lit internally that never stopped, and unconditional love was just pouring out of here, and that was uncontrollable. It was just and it never shut back down. That's how it was experienced here. And from that moment onward, there was no desire to fix anyone. There was just the perception of the perfection of everything moving forward from that point. No matter what behavior it was or how people were, there was no sense that anything needed to change. There was a complete acceptance of life and everything in it exactly as it is, and seeing the beauty of that. And so you'd had those realizations earlier on. I'm sure some of that sounds familiar, and it's quite common through awakening to see the perfection and that type of thing. But this was like the permanent living expression of that everything is me, and so I love it automatically, regardless. I love absolutely everything because it is me, and I cannot shut it down no matter what. I have no control over this love that pours out here. And so this was a shift that happened pretty early into unity. And from that time onward, the operating system was quite different here. So any type of codependent fixing behavior, any tendencies you had from earlier stages, they are resolved with this shift. And then there's no longer any desire at all to try and change anyone, or there is a helping that is a part of the selfless service that happens naturally, but there's not a trying to fix anyone, because you can see nobody needs fixing. They're already the Buddha. They're already enlightened. They're already me. They're already God. Why would I need to give them any advice or fix them in any way? So all of that drops away, and that feels really wonderful, honestly, to have that. You can see that that was a type of control strategy that you had, and even though you might have thought you had really good intentions with trying to fix people or help people in the past, you get to see that that was all a part of egoic tendencies, and to operate in unity consciousness, you don't need that anymore. So you still have very strong empathy as a part of being in unity. You have strong innate compassion, but you also do not have a desire to fix anyone. So if someone asks you for help, so you're working with someone, you're talking about awakening, like I do as a mentor, and they're asking you a question, then of course you answer, and you have compassion, and you express it as clearly as possible, and you try to help. But if nobody asks you for your help, then you're totally fine with that. You don't feel that pulling feeling of like, oh, but I know the answer to that, and I could help them. I really, they're suffering, and I really know how to ease that. That desire is gone when you have this opening into unconditional love, and that feels it's a much more peaceful way to be in the world. I also noticed that any sort of empathy that had gone a bit more on the toxic side had also resolved around this time. So there is a thing as being too empathetic, too leaky with boundaries, and tapping in too much to your environment. And this is just a strategy we develop as children if we come from a trauma background. And so that was also resolved. And I would say the empathy is still there, but it gets to a healthy boundaried level automatically through this shift, also to do with the unconditional love, opening up to that. So that is a big part of unity, is deeper layers to do with love until you have that shift into unconditional love. And then that seems to just be permanent from there. It doesn't seem to be much unraveling on to do with love that happens after that, perhaps just a deepening. There are some challenges that come from being in unity. Every phase of awakening has its ups and downs, its benefits and its challenges. And unity is the same, although we could call it the peak phase of awakening, and things are as good as they're probably ever going to be, and you do feel pretty good most of the time. There are still the challenges that come with being in unity. And I would say one is that you're perceiving the world very differently from everyone around you. It's likely that you're the only person you know that is perceiving things in that way. And so there's a bit of a isolation or loneliness on a human level that comes from that you adapt to, but you do know that you'll never perceive things in the same way as everyone else. And so you do feel different in that way. So although it's a bit of a paradox, you see that everyone is you also know that they don't see things, they believe that they're a person, and you know that that's not true. And people can energetically pick up on that, intuitively pick up on that there's something different about you, and they don't necessarily like that. They might be scared or push you away, or whatever the case may be. So that is a challenge of being in unity, that it is quite isolating in a way, quite lonely in a way. but you don't mind because you feel good. Another challenge of unity, I would say, is that you forget the previous state of consciousness. You forget what it's like to be in egoic consciousness, believing you're a separate person. And so you may talk about it if you're teaching and if you're working with someone, like I do one-on-one, working with people, you are reminded of what it is like through talking to them. It helps you to remember. But otherwise, you really start to lose access to a lot of memory and a lot just what it was like experientially being in egoic consciousness. You really can't access it anymore. It's like that door has shut and you don't have access. And the further you go into unity, the less access you have to that. So there's some real beauty of teachings that come from someone that's just shifted into unity because they have access to both. And I think that brings on quite a beautiful expression, being able to remember what that suffering is like. Whereas you go along with unity, you don't talk about the suffering so much because you aren't suffering and you can't remember what it feels like. So I think that's a challenge of unity, particularly if you're working with people, because you can't remember what it's like to suffer in that way, believing you're a person. And that makes it difficult to connect with people that are. You have to really tune into empathy and feel the suffering of the other, believing, because you only see them as God and that they don't need to change. That's how you're perceiving them, but you're reminded by their suffering that they believe they're a person and that they're going through that process. And so it can be a challenge to not be able to remember what it's like to suffer in that way. I know that sounds funny, but I feel like that's a challenge of unity. There are many, many good parts to unity. One of the best parts, I would say, that's hard to choose out of feeling good most of the time is certainly a good part, but also just the simplicity of life, just how there's no drama and how things become very easeful. I would say that's probably my favorite part. And that's because I came from a challenging life with a lot of drama and a lot of hardships and a very challenging and dramatic awakening with a lot of change. And to have things be so easeful and simple and peaceful consistently, it's very healing and nourishing and probably my favorite part of unity to this point.